All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. I'm Olga, your host, and today I'm here with Marie McDonald, who I am very excited for you to hear her talk. Normally, not normally, but a lot of the times when I bring somebody to the podcast, I know them very well. This is an exception. I don't know Marie very well. We're both being coached by the same coach right now. But she's here because I heard her speak at my coach's podcast. And Marie, you might not know this, but I was like, she needs to come into my podcast. I just want that energy in my podcast. I want people to hear you. And I thought you and I could have a really cool conversation about what it takes to bring great things into the world, which is your specialty. So I'll let you fully introduce yourself. But for all of you listening, I always like to introduce my guest. I know Marie is a wife. She's a mom. She's a life coach and a business coach. And her and I have in common this passion to helping people go from place A to place B. But her specialty is on just getting things out of your brain into a full creation, which I am just so excited to just pick your brain. I think it's such a privilege that we have you. So thank you so much for having come to, having taken my offer and coming into the podcast. I would love to hear more about you. So tell us anything you want to tell us about yourself before we just dive into this conversation.
Yeah, you got it. Well, thank you so much for loving that podcast and wanting me on. I have to say I was really excited when you reached out to me too, because in the snippets, as you said, we don't know each other well, but the things that you have shared have really resonated with me when I've heard you in our coaching groups. And so I'm excited for this conversation too. And I live in San Diego with my husband and my two kids. I have a 6-year-old who thinks he's Harry Potter. He wears like pretend Harry Potter glasses around everywhere. He's a little joker, a little cutie. And then I have a 10-year-old girl. She's about to turn 10, who's very just soulful and amazing, and a wonderful husband who's a design builder down here. And I spent my career, the majority of my career, in design thinking. So I led workshops and retreats and coached executives and leaders that were leading innovation communities. So my expertise, although I got my master's degree in art criticism and studio art, you believe that? Like writing as a minor. But then I went into the field of innovation. And so my 15, 20 years has been in coaching, and then in coaching people to turn ideas into real things and to lead other people like kids, educators, and other leaders to turn their ideas into real things. So I see it on lots of different levels, in like a child's mind and in a CEO's mind. And I'm very passionate about helping people get their ideas out of their heads and into the world where they belong. And then the last thing I'll just say about myself is that I have so much belief in this for a couple of reasons, because I love human beings so much. I'm a people geek. I'm a people lover, and I love to put that to use to like allow other people to borrow my belief in them until they can really solidify their own and get the hang of believing in themselves. And then also I have used these tools, mindsets and ways of thinking and actual skills to reinvent my own life multiple times. And so I just draw from my own experience and my love of people.
Okay, I love everything you just said. But you know what it got me thinking? You describe your 6-year-old as like he believes he's Harry Potter. How much of your
Oh, totally.
own personal love for just making people bring into reality anything that they think about is his, freedom to just believe that he's Harry Potter. I love it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have never thought of that. And that's hilarious and amazing for me to have that lens as I look at my kids and sort of, yes, I'm such a yes and person. I am not, if he has an idea that I'm not super into, I get myself there. And I sort of guide it to something that I think is really helpful to him or to her. It's my daughter's birthday, and she wanted the theme to be Greek gods. And then we have not a close friend, but a friend in her class whose birthday it also is. And I said, hey, how about if we do this as a combo party? So all the parents don't have to go to 2 birthdays and we can support the other family. And she said, great. And she came home from school the next day and said, well, I talked to this other kid who's having the birthday party, and we decided we're going to I want a Greek gods and he wanted baseball. So it's Greek gods baseball. And it's always, I'm like, yes, all right, let's do this. Thor is going to hit a home run. We're going to make this happen. And then we build off of whatever their idea is. So when my son fell head over heels for Harry Potter, I was like, okay, let's do this. We hung a giant swing in the backyard and with a carabiner on the bottom, and got my kids both climbing belts. And then we got him a broom. So then we let him go like from really high, and he swings back and forth and plays Quidditch. We like run around with a ball. And so, yes, now that you say that.
So much fun. Yeah. Like that's the first thing I thought. I'm like, what parent is like so happy and like excited about, and then thinking about your own creative. And it doesn't surprise me that you started in design like that. I think all of what you do, I think of myself as, I think that every artist, that's their gift, is to bring into life something that is very creative, whether that's through writing or through like actual art. And I just love that you've used this same artistic concept to help leaders and CEOs bring into life maybe programs, maybe policies, maybe leadership skills that were just in their head. Because people, like, I would think of myself as not creative because I come from a family of artists where they're all like like they will come up with a painting, you know, like I've got a painting right here that my sister made representing the work I do with people. You kind of can see it. So like you organize their, you know, their brain. And so I would never be able to produce that ever. So I've always thought of myself as somebody who's not creative. When I think about my writing, when I think about the ways in which I help people, I'm like incredibly creative. Like I will use every possible resource at my disposal to just help people come to the other end. And I think this is so beautiful how you just merge art, design with mindset and actually helping people grab those ideas in their head and like create something, create their empire or whatever they're wanting to create.
Yeah. Like half my clients are leaders in companies, scaling businesses, starting business, and the other half are just trying to make a change in their life. Like one of them might want to write a book, or one of them wants to become an influencer and live on a boat and sail around the world, but somebody else just wants to figure out what their next step is in life. And it's the same skill set that innovators use to invent new technologies, start social movements, the same things that they struggle with, and the same answers to those struggles, which are ways of thinking and ways of doing, are the same things that we use to change anything in our lives, whether that's showing up to a relationship in a more powerful way, changing our family dynamic, deciding to leave a relationship and start something else, or decide to move across the country in a new job, anything, lose weight, quit drinking, drink less, whatever the thing is that exists as an idea for a different reality in your mind, the same tools that innovators use to create a Tesla or, you know, whatever, it's the same thing. And so what my goal is to break those down and make them super accessible and fun for people to do, because we are so daunted by the future idea.
Yeah.
It's a blast to get into it.
I really like the fun part. Okay, so why don't we just talk about this? Why don't we break down for people? Because I think some people are really good at manifesting, right? Like this thought, this idea they had, and boom, now it's like in their life, in their house, they've manifested something. And I don't know what your thoughts are about it, but I believe in all things and energies and whatnot. But I think that the key to manifestation really is action. It's not just like hoping and believing that one day you're going to have a child, but like, what does it take to make a child? Like, what are the steps, right? I mean, you're going to have to go through the steps or else you will have no child. And so I think that I would love to break it down for our audience that is not manifesting or bringing into life things that we want. Requires a lot of work, I think, more than we anticipate, and a lot of mental discipline and a lot of like, like to think about your child wanting to be Harry Potter, just be behaving and believing and like just being that cute child. We all have that child inside ourselves who has like this great imagination and believe that it can be in any kind of reality that we choose to be. But why don't we break it down in so people don't just walk around thinking, there are those who manifest and they're like made out of something else. And then there are those like me who do not manifest, who, you know, just bad luck. We don't know how to, we don't have that kind of woo energy to ourselves and we just don't do it. But where do we start with this conversation? I think I can add some things.
Yeah.
But I'll just love you to just take on the lead as to like, what do we tell people? Like, what do I need to know about like creating, taking an idea and bringing it to life and like really seeing this manifested into their life?
Yeah, so good. I love how you differentiated people that do and people that don't. And that reminds me of something that you said about yourself as an artist. What you described there, this is just an aside, and then I'll answer your question, is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right? I don't know if you're familiar with those terms, but growth, everyone is at a different skill level in relation to every task or thing that they do. And there is no, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this. Of course, some of us have a proclivity in certain areas, but the difference between people that create great things and act on their idea is action. And it is the skill that is developed and the confidence and practice that's developed through repetition and through trying. So a growth-oriented mindset is always not to say, I am good at this or I am not good at this. It is to see yourself on the spectrum of skill in relation to anything. And there aren't skilled people and not skilled people. We all are on a spectrum related to everything that we do. So this is this growth mindset that I love.
And so based on that theory, and this is totally aside because you just picked my interest, where does then interest come into play here? So I might not be, I have zero interest actually in painting, right? Like my sister might do. So it's fitting for me to think I'm not good at that. I haven't practiced it. You're right. And like there's in the spectrum, where the spectrum begins at zero, I might be really close to that. Where does like, that desire of wanting to become good or even like attempting to do that one thing?
Yeah, it's just up to you. I think, we get to decide, which is we have this incredible playground of the world where we get to decide what we're interested in, as long as we don't buy into a mentality that we have a fixed set of skills. So when people have an idea, something that they want, what I see in my clients and what I've seen in all of the people that I've coached are that when they're not taking action, it's because of one of three reasons. And all three of the reasons are thought errors or fallacies in logic, which is the great news. So we can just learn to see what our brain's doing and then not believe it, right? So one is that they don't know where to start. Folks think that start out thinking there is a right place to start, and there is not, right? Like you said, it is all about action and iteration. And when we try to solve the answer of, but I need more information, I've never done this before, we think it's like a board game with like a start square, and it's not. You really do get to start wherever you are. And the only thing that matters is that you do start. So that's the first thing. They don't know where to start. The second thing is that they don't prioritize it. And there are a lot of different reasons for this, which sort of relates to your question about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. One of the reasons we don't start is because we don't believe we're special enough, or like we have something that's unique to say. And oh girl, I will fight you on that. It's like every single one of us has, you've heard me talk about this, but a unique set of lived experiences, this face, these ideas, no matter what you believe about reincarnation or multiple lives or whatever, this is happening right now in this way, in these moments once. And so you can say something that has never been said before based on what you see. And I am starting my own podcast, and I'll talk for a whole episode about this, how it's like conceptual in the way of like big inventions that you can put in the world, but also saying something to the barista that's making your coffee, and how what a different world it creates based on one phrase that you can choose to say based on what you notice, right? But people don't prioritize it because they think they're not special. And so some of my work is to just help people get through that, or because they've been socialized to think that they need to serve all the time. And many of us, specifically people who identify as women or non-binary, but also I want to say that some of the clients that I have that identify as male also have a strong service mentality where they're just really hesitant to spend time or money or effort or prioritization on what they want. And so that's another reason why we don't prioritize it, or just because we don't take the time, because we're always reactive and doing things in front of us. So the great thing is those are all either skills. Prioritization is a skill. Making decisions is a skill. And the other ones are just mindset and thought changes to make. And I will tell you that whole idea that we're not special or that it's selfish to take time on ourselves, it It is the opposite. I see it time and time again, because when we do value our own voice, start loving the experience of being in our own skin, two things happen. One is we put amazing things out into the world that never could have been there before, that make the world a better place. And the second thing is we take things less personally, we're less reactive, we get into less drama because we're good. We're like, no, I feel good. I'm living the life that I'm here to live. We feel more confident walking around in the world. And so we're better, like, life partners to the other human beings who are walking around beside us. We're more likely to empower them and not feel conflict or competition.
I love it, because basically what you're describing is the formula that I apply for my clients in my coaching programs to be authentic. Like, I'm less about let's be calm and more about let's come home to who you were born to be. And I feel that much of what you're saying is it's that getting rid of these mental blockages, mindsets, or developing the skills that allow us to then just be more of who we came here to be, like that raw element of who we are. And I loved, because I've experienced this personally, your idea of that authenticity might just be you observing and saying out loud an observation that might make a world of a difference for somebody else, like the barista at Starbucks. I don't know, I'm sure this has happened to you. It's happened to me more times than I can count, where somebody says, oh, I will never forget this one thing you said to me that changed my life. And to me, it's so dramatic. What do you mean it changed your life? And I would never remember what I said. Like, I have no idea what I said. And then they say it again. I'm like, that? How was so significant and empowering to you?
Oh my gosh.
And so right, when we're our own judges of like, this is not going to change anybody's life, I'm not going to say it, we get to be into their own brain. We have no idea how we're like stopping the world maybe from benefiting. And somebody else might hear me say the same thing and get nothing out of it. But what that one person that heard it and who would claim their life has changed because of me saying an observation, just reinforces your point, I guess, of just like how brilliant it is to just be and then express.
Yeah.
And being okay with it.
And we're often just like being and expressing without intention, right? And I see that change lives. You know, there's that whole metaphor of a rudder on a boat, right? Like a little tiny change and you end up somewhere totally different, which is kind of what we're talking about here. You say one thing, it creates a difference in the person's concept of themselves. And then a new world of possibility that they can interact with opens up that wasn't visible to them before. So you've sort of lifted a veil to make visible a new world of possibility. And I have seen that with children so many times. And I also see it with CEOs. It's the same. It's like, you know, we can create incredible possibility for one another, or we can do the opposite. And we can really say things that limit each other's self-concept. And then...
Go ahead, finish that.
Then there's one other thing that stops people that I'll tell you when you want.
Okay, go ahead, do that.
Okay, the third thing is that we don't believe that we can. So we don't prioritize it, we don't know where to start, and then we don't think that we can. And that is such a fallacy, because this blows my mind, right? People look around at the world and think it doesn't exist out there yet, so clearly it's not possible. Like, such a fallacy, right? Like, any beautiful invention that's sitting around you in the world right now, what if someone thought that about it, right?
The phone. Are you right? Like light. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, exactly. Right. Light bulbs, this microphone we're talking on, you know, but social movements too, you know, things that change the world require someone to conceive of them and believe in them. And then when the other thing that happens is they either believe that it doesn't exist out there, or we look to our past to define what we've been capable of, which is again a fallacy, because in our past we have, engaged in a set of beliefs and behaviors that are based on environments that we were pretty arbitrarily like found ourselves in, right? And so we have been capable of whatever the product of those environments has been so far. And once we develop, again, lift that veil and see, oh, I've been believing these things about myself, I can change those beliefs. Totally different things are possible. And so, like, again, if a child who's learning to walk was like, well, I've never walked before, then what would happen, right? Or if a child that fails and falls decides that that fear of falling or the self-doubt should stop them. That should be evidence that they should stop trying, then they never walk, right? And so that's the other thing that happens for us is we think failure is a reason to stop. We think self-doubt's a reason to stop when it is indeed and in fact the opposite. It's the sign to keep going.
I absolutely love that. Like all 3 points, I would agree with you. This is what I see people thinking about self-growth and about any goal, like that they're not giving it, that they're not seeing success. I will come back to like these 3 points are very much it. What I love about this last point is that our brain, a faculty of the brain is to always look for evidence of whatever we're thinking about, right? Like, and it will give you great evidence when your thoughts are that you're powerful. And it will give you great evidence when your thoughts are that you're not powerful, and it will just find it. And if it needs to go 10 years down the path to just collect that one piece of evidence to bring forward to. And I love your parallel to learning to walk. We take it for granted. Personally, I had a really bad car accident when I was 16, and it took me almost 6 months to walk again. And I remember thinking, holy shit, how did I ever take walking for granted? There are so many steps to be taken. There's so many things that need to be in alignment and walk in balance. And so I was learning to walk at 16 as if I was a 1-year-old learning to walk, except that I had this awareness that, wow, this is a lot of freaking work, which goes back to my initial point where I think people think that manifesting or bringing things into the world, any goal, any version of yourself should be easy. And it's only given to those that are special and that have like this, wow, you get everything you want. And rather than thinking how much work do you put towards that, we just tend to hate them. I mean, like, well, it must be nice that you've got, a rich husband that's, doing this. It must be nice that your parents were able to provide you with this versus thinking of the amount of work. And so that parallel, and for all of us who have ever been exposed to any child learning to walk, it's actually like a 2-year process. Like a 2-year
totally.
process for most kids. And that we're, like there, some will take longer.
And your point, that child has to hold in their mind themselves 2 years from now, right? Mm-hmm. With more belief than all of the moments when they fall. And that's what we have to do with failure is we have to know that like there's that concept of how our brains want to stay in the cave, want to stay safe, right? So when we have an idea, we also we want to keep our idea in the cave, right? Because once we take the idea out into the world, there's like the elements. We bring it out into the light where it can exist, but there's wind and there's sun and who knows what else, like animals and predator, mountains to climb with this idea. And that's good and right, and we should be the ones that guard the idea, regardless of how hard the wind is blowing against it, right? Or guard what we want. We have to hold that vision of ourselves 2 years from now, the possibility of what we're creating in mind, relentlessly, right? We have to find our reason why it matters more than anything to us, which I always love when people can tie that to what they think their purpose is in the world. And then, to your point, we got to stay in our lane. Like the comparison thing, oh my gosh, that will break your idea, right? Just getting beautiful insight and community and support from those around you and inspiration, but never the opposite, right? Never using other people's success against us for so many reasons, for ourselves, for our ideas and what we can create in the world, and also for how we're showing up as a partner to all these other people.
Yeah, and I think people listening to us right now are thinking like, this is all good. Yes, I have all these thoughts, but I don't know how to start, which you mentioned was fallacy number 1 is I don't know how to does not equal you can't, you shouldn't, it will not work. Yeah. And going back to the analogy of that 1-year-old learning to walk, and if that child was to compare themselves to another walker, or which moms do, right? Like we're like, oh shit, your child already walks? Why are they so behind? And we just might be like, we panic, but the kid is like in their own pace. They're not doing that. They're like, I'll walk when I'll walk. Okay. I'll get it. Eventually we'll walk. If that child was to think of failure, which is a thought, right? Like if that child was to think of like, I fell down, I'm never going to do this again. I'm clearly not meant to do this. And we as a parent were to contemplate the same concept and be like, you're right, you fell down one too many times. Let's just take walking out of the way now. We think we're saving ourselves some trouble and work, but think of this child never walking because of that concept. How much more work would that amount to in that child's life when he's perfectly able and capable of walking, but had one thought that was also fed by the parent or somebody else in their lives? And so everybody agreed that the best, easiest way for him to live was to not experience that failure again, to protect this child from like that feeling. And that would be making life easier. I want to address that one because I'm sure you probably would agree with me that sometimes we make, as a grown-ups, the CEOs of our own companies, we might make decisions based on what we think would be too much to handle. And like it would be better and less work if we were to avoid it altogether, not put this idea into the world or not have that goal to begin with, because it's likely going to guarantee us more failures than success. And yet what we're doing is creating far more work long-term for ourselves. And we're also telling our community, I cannot do this. And everybody around you begins to behave as you, the person who cannot do it, whether that's regulating your emotional well-being or being your own boss.
Yes. And I love a couple of fun things about what you just said. It's like the child that doesn't continue the pursuit of walking misses all of the giggles that happen and the like journey alongside someone else that's supporting them to walk when they fall, right? Like all of that can be play. We only decided, we made the rule that failure's bad and hard, but like that, like you're saying, is just a thought. Literally, what if failure, we decide it's fun? Then what, right? Then you go to work finding ways to prove to yourself that it's fun, right? Mm-hmm. And secondly, I love this concept that just occurred to me where like the kids' motivation, their why to learn to walk it's because it looks fun to run around on legs and maybe they can reach really high stuff and that's cool. But it's not because of what other people will think of them when they walk. It's not because of some like identity, right, that they're trying to build in the world. It's because it's fun, right? And I love that concept of motivation. And then just when we can apply that to ourselves, to your point, we live by example and become the possibility in other people's minds. And for leaders, if you're coaching a lot of leaders of their own organizations, I coach lots of leaders of people. The more work we do to free ourselves, the more we are able to recognize the freedom that we can give to the people we support. And we can the more we believe in our own ideas, the more we recognize the ideas that they have that we can believe in. And we know that dissenting opinions, a variety, diverse opinions, diverse groups and backgrounds, they make work better. They make the world better. And so when we can open our minds to recognize ideas and possibility, it is creating a more thriving world and more possibility for others.
Oh, I love that. And when you said, if I coach a lot of leaders in organizations, which I do, the thought that came to my mind though was I coach a lot of moms who are leaders.
Yeah.
Or leaders, like whether you like it or not, you are leading in your community, in your household. Like we have so much say. And so when I transfer that concept of CEO to employees or to their team, motherhood to our children, what we're like the freedom that we're creating in their own ability to be authentic and not be the result of our fears, or to be exactly what we hope and expectations we have for them, how liberating it is. For those of you listening who might be, we have about 80,000 downloads right now, or listeners in the podcast on a regular basis, which is fun. But so I don't know who listens to this. You are going to notice soon, Marie, that you put a lot of content out there in your podcast. And then you're like, did anybody hear this? I hope they do. Stats will show you. Some people are listening. So hello to you. But for the moms, and also the not moms, like just anybody, but like moms, you're leaders. And I really want you to kind of think of yourself as that. And if you're not a mom, but you have like a job serving coffee, you're a leader of that position yourself. And you doing this work of allowing yourself to just be authentic and like, I just love the giving birth, like that analogy of giving birth into a world, your ideas, your observations, by you doing the work and you yourself giving permission to possibility and to think that we're all equally amazing, to put into the world our ideas and our observations, that by doing so, without having to tell anybody to do it themselves, you are giving them permission. And you're starting to then see the value into what anybody else thinks.
So good. Yes.
Like, I think that's so powerful and something that we're missing in this society today. I think that we just want everybody to be the same. And we're so afraid of differences that we don't even talk to anybody who might think differently than we do, because we have lost the vision that is such a wealth and like richness to think differently and to share that space of being different.
Yeah, and we've actually like driven a society that values the opposite, right? So that has created such divisiveness. And so to your point, with a mother who's raising children who, number one, there's so much data to show that kids really benefit from working moms. Or from moms that value themselves and their own time, because they see the example not of service at the expense of the individual, but that both things can be true. You can love and lead and also take care of yourselves. And then, as you're saying, as we all know who have children, they hear what we say, but they really see what we do, right? And so that's such a brilliant gift to teach them that you don't, our society has taught women or those who identify as women that we need to be all the things all the time, right? And when you can make up your own rules and decide what's important to you, your kids learn to do that too. And I always call this like the big L and the little L. I love what you said, Olga, about how like you might be leading 300 people in an organization as a CEO, or you might be leading your kids at home and not working. And the leadership in both spheres is just as important. And so what I like to kind of coach my clients on is that little L leadership can be in an exchange with your kids, at a party, when a friend starts talking shit about somebody else, right? That little L is what you choose to go along with and how you choose to inhabit your own life and conversations and exchanges. And that is just as important to be the lion-hearted leader in those moments as it is to be the lion-hearted leader of a social movement or a company, right? So that's why I love this concept of turning ideas into real things is not just for like quote unquote big L leaders. It's for all of us because we all have infinite opportunities every day to lead.
And I don't know you, but nothing excites me more than somebody coming up with an idea and telling me, like, I'm thinking about this. I'm like, what? Do it. Like, I don't care what it is. To turn all walls blue, I'll be all for it, because somebody has like this, I don't know, like this fire inside themselves that they thought this would be a great idea. And to this date, and you might disagree with me, and that's totally fair, I don't think they're a bad idea. I mean, unless your idea is to kill a whole bunch of people, I'll definitely say like that's a terrible idea. Let's explore why. But most of our ideas that are well intended, that come from such a good place of like, this will make me really happy, even if you think it's only going to make you very happy, I promise you, in your journey to that, so many people will benefit from it.
Yeah, we touched on that, like how you being happier makes you calmer, less reactive. You don't take things personally. You're a better listener. You're an active listener instead of self-referentially listening. Like so many reasons that are not selfish for you to make yourself happy. So true.
Now, you brought it up from the beginning and we just sort of made reference, but I'd like to dive into that a little bit more for the audience. How the steps are the same to bring in forward, like to give birth to an idea, whether you are a CEO or if you're my first job in Canada was serving coffees at a Tim Hortons when I spoke zero English, and it was fucking challenging. And I had to think so much about my role and my position and what I was there to do. It occupied so much of my existence. And so I always have like so much respect for baristas who have to serve coffees to everybody who are like very picky about how they want their coffee, and making a mistake could be so fatal for them. But whatever your position in life, whatever your role in life, the responsibility of bringing forward your ideas, the responsibility of being happy in your life, it's the same. And I'd love for us to explore a little bit more about Because I know when I was serving coffee, I felt like, well, my job is not as important as yours. So I guess the level of skills and responsibility might not be like yours. And I can only imagine people listening to this episode and thinking, well, how can she say it's the same for a 2-year-old than it is for a CEO? How do we break that humanity back into them? Like, we're all humans. So at the core, it doesn't matter what your role is, your social or social economical status is. At the end of the day, we all have bad thoughts, like not bad thoughts. I'll take that back. Fallacy thoughts, thoughts that I have errors in them, and that it ends up freezing us from creating these great ideas into the world. So, what are your concepts of like that being the same for person A or person B?
Yeah, well, we spoke a little bit to every single human has a unique expression, and I very much don't consider that to be hierarchical, so that if your expression is received by more, it is more impactful. There's this philosopher I studied called Kaja Silverman. She's out of Berkeley, and she has this book called World Spectators, and her philosophy is that the objective world is subjectively intended. What she means by that is that when you walk by a flower and you see the flower blooming from a specific angle that no one else sees, that flower becomes more fully realized in its existence. And I am obsessed with this theory, right? With this just way of thinking, because that is the barista moment, right? Like you foaming the milk in this incredible way because you're there to foam the milk in that moment and hand it to someone is the thing that creates more sort of like existence, or a more fully realized existence for the person receiving the coffee, for you, because you are inhabiting your skin and your body and your effort in that moment, instead of I have 3 more hours till I get off, right? Till I get
Or
off.
this job is meaningless, right? Like
Right.
I was in law school when I had to interrupt my life and move to Canada. Not my choice. And suddenly from like having this privileged life and like having status, because right, I made it to law school, to serving fucking coffees and like making bagels for breakfast. I never thought this is less meaningful, right? Like, but I brought 100% of my heart into that. How do I best wrap these bagels so the person driving can like have a pleasant experience eating these while driving?
So
I'm not
good.
gonna spill all over.
Our life is a series of moments, and we can, breathe beauty into one another's moments. I also was a barista for a long time, and that was one of the ways that I reinvented myself. But at that time, I also, because of some trauma that I had grown up with, had an eating disorder that I almost died from. And that was the first time that I reinvented myself in my early 20s. And what I had to do, and what anybody has to be willing to do in order to really change something in their life, is have an open enough mind to have a learner's mind, to be able to step into, I could, if I see a belief that is limiting me, I am willing to burn it to the ground and do the work to adopt a different one. And I remember at that time, I was like, well, this is not working. I am just going to relearn how to be a person with a body. And that relearning how to be a person with a body allowed me to shift from a bartender to a vice president in an innovation company, to go from single to having this incredible husband and 2 children that never would have existed if I hadn't have healed from that. I think that all the time. And to most recently, I was in this job in the innovation field that I loved. I loved the impact we were making. I loved the people, but I was so burnt out, Olga. I was like moving my family back and forth to LA, just working too much. And so it also helped me just have the courage to leave that job and create my own business, which has been just in less than a year has reached, a really successful place. And I'm just having a blast. It feels scary, but fear and self-doubt are reasons to keep going, because it means you're doing the thing. And like, what's the point if we're not going to get to the end of our lives and be thinking of all the things we didn't do, You're going to fail along the way. Let's go. And the last thing just around it is that stops people is not having a community. So I am a big proponent of having a coach, or having a coaching group, or having a friend, even a colleague, someone that you can, once your idea is like hatched enough that you can not need it to be reinforced by other people's beliefs all the time, share with somebody, share the ride with somebody, because you're going to experience successes and then you're going to think that you're home free and then you're going to fall and fail. And you need to be able to tell someone, like, ugh, this sucks. I thought I was good, but you're in a new arena constantly as you put your idea, you evolve your idea into bigger and bigger spaces, or just as you change who you are with the leading in your everyday life, and something new happens. You get sick or you travel or it's a different social group. It's all just as important.
I love it. And I think this is I had tears in my eyes. I'm a crier. Marie, you don't know this about me, but I cry probably every day.
So much.
My husband thinks I have a quota of tears to make every year. Every day I'm like, I've met the quota of today.
Tears. Oh my gosh.
I get teary eye when I hear somebody be just so on purpose. And you having shared that, had you not heal your eating disorder, your children wouldn't exist. This happy marriage wouldn't exist. This business that is blooming wouldn't exist. The people that you are helping wouldn't have this part of you that's so stronger and wiser because of overcoming and reinventing. I'm going to borrow that term from here on. We're going to reinvent. I talk about changing the narrative that we've had from past traumas and like looking at it differently. It's how I've built resiliency for myself. But I love this idea of reinventing, because then you get to be as creative as you want. And you get to decide to grab things from the past that have really served you and then add new ones. And you get to just borrow things from people like, I like this term. I'm going to borrow that. It's going to help me. So I'm going to do it. And I love this idea that you're presenting, CEO, mom, or barista, that you get to decide what does that look like for you? Who are you building? What persona are you building as you're doing that? And as you're connecting it to your purpose in life, which I think is just so beautiful. Marie, I know you're starting your podcast and I know we're running out of time. So I really want you to tell everybody, where can they continue to hear your brilliant ideas?
Yeah.
And anything else you want to tell them.
Okay, cool.
With you.
You can follow me. My website is under construction right now, but it'll be back up. That's at Do the Bloom. But for right now, dothebloom.com. For right now, the.bloom.coach on Instagram is where you can follow me to get the little daily Mind Bloom hits. And you can also subscribe to my weekly email list there in Linktree up in my bio. And then my podcast, I'm in the works right now. I'm building it. So fun. And that will be launching. It's called Bloom Your Mind, the Bloom Your Mind podcast, or just Bloom Your Mind podcast with Marie McDonald. And that will be wherever you listen to podcasts. And that's coming out in the middle of November. So I'm super excited about that.
So hopefully you guys are listening to this episode just before, and you'll be able to listen to Bloom Your Mind podcast. I love it. I think it's so fitting. And I think this is what you do so well. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. There is so much more that I could be dissecting out of just this conversation with you, Marie. Maybe you'll come back to the podcast and we'll have more conversations. I hope you enjoyed. I really encourage you to follow Marie, because I can only imagine when you shared you wanted to have a podcast, I was like, yes, you need to have one. I enjoyed listening to your episode when you came to Stacy's, that I was like, how do I hear more from her? I want to know more what she thinks about, what are her thoughts? And I know you're going to do a great job. You always do. So I'm happy that you're giving birth to this podcast. And I am happy that everybody who's here can now tag into your podcast and also listen. I encourage you all to get to know Marie better and get to know her work and listen to her podcast and reach out to her if you feel called to do so. She is friendly and smart, and you hear all the rest. So thank you for listening. And Marie, thank you so much for being a guest in
this was so delightful. It was my pleasure.
It's fun. All right. See you guys next Monday.